So let me just introduce our next speaker, Assistant Secretary of Labor for Mine Safety and Health, Joe Main.
It's good to be back. This is a place that I enjoy coming to every year if I get invited back, and as long as I do my job, I think I may. A couple things I want to say just to start out the conversation. The one thing that you left off of that is I was a miners rep coal miner. Started representing miners on mine safety when I was 19 years old. I did that to this day. And I represent all miners. At some point in my life, that transition shifted from coal mining to the university. Even I've worked with some folks here in this room, I know out in the audience on an international level, making mines, all mines safer for our world's miners. What I'd like to do is first thank Mike and Jim and the folks for inviting me here today. In the audience is Don Foster out there somewhere. He's our Northeast district manager for MSHA. These folks work hard every day to carry out the missions that we lay out. And I got to tell you this, the stats I want to run through today is what they are because of the good staff we have at MSHA, but also the folks sitting in this audience. I think that all the work we're doing collectively is moving mine safety and health in the right direction. And as long as we hold what we have and keep making improvements, we are going to achieve the goal of a miner going to work in this country, everyone going to work in this country, and at the end of the year, doing a survivor count, then we have zeros at the end. This is going to be an industry one day that I believe is going to be the safest industry in the country if we make it that way, if we keep moving the way that we are, and I'll talk about why I believe that's possible. You know, we're celebrating the 35th anniversary of the 77 Mine Act this year. That's what brought all coal miners, salt miners, silver miners, gold miners, everyone together under the same piece of legislation. And what it did in one fell swoop was give all miners the same protections that coal miners had from the 1969 Coal Mine Act, amongst other things, having a mandatory inspection program where twice a year every surface mine gets inspected, 4 times a year every underground mine gets inspected, regardless of the type. You know, gold, silver, coal, aggregates, salt mines. And it also brought with it some pretty stringent enforcement tools. Basically, if there's a violation, it was to be cited. If it was cited, there'd be a penalty attached to it. This was something new to folks who had been under the 1966 Metal and Non-Metallic Act, and it set the stage for the changes that would come to improve mine safety. So that was something that merged us all together. Gave us some new protections, as I'm going to talk about here just shortly. One was, for the first time in history, there's provision for workers that said, you know, if you get fired because you raised a safety complaint under the Mine Act, there's going to be a provision in this law that says you can be temporarily reinstated to your job while the litigation is going forward. Huge piece of legislation that unfortunately hadn't had a chance to play itself out as it should have until, I think, recently. There was protections for workers that said, you know, if you have a miner's rep, and I think there's a few out in this audience, that you could actually get paid for traveling with the MSHA inspectors. We got that right in 1977. And the other thing that probably people don't realize, as long as we've been mining in this country, for the first time in history, was 1977 before we ever had a standard in Mine Act and legislation that said, oh, by the way, you got to train these miners. I mean, think about that, 1977. This was a historical time. Well, did all these and many other changes and improvements work? In 1977, we had about 273 miners dying on the job in this country. And 134 of those were metal-on-metal mines, mines that you all represent out there. If you look fast forward to 2012, we dropped that number down to 34. Think about that. The challenge that people had sitting in these same rooms in 1977 and what they were looking forward to, and how much all of us, have made a difference in improving mine safety. There was about an 80% reduction in mining deaths after Congress passed that piece of legislation that we've all benefited by. The good news is that we haven't squeezed all of that Mine Act out yet. And the news that I have to deliver today, what we've done over the last 2 or 3 years collectively, we have made a difference in squeezing a lot more of it out. The challenges that we face at MSHA on a daily basis is the same challenges I think we all face here. How can we have a workplace in this country where a miner can go to work, put in their shift, and go home safe and healthy every day? That's what they deserve. Anybody who becomes a miner in this country deserves that. And they deserve a government that's looking out for them. They deserve a company that's looking out for them. And they deserve the right to have representatives speaking up on their behalf. So along those lines, the way that we approach mine safety in this country, all those things are on the table. Workers have to have a voice in a workplace if we are to be successful in having mine safety in this country. It's just that simple. We've implemented a number of programs over the past couple, 3 years. I've talked about them before. One of them is our impact inspection program, where we scour the data we get from our inspections. We identify mines that have a troubled history, and we spend extra time there. There's probably a number of mines that are affected here, or that have been targeted here by folks sitting here in the audience today. We believe that program has worked. We have conducted over 650 of these impact inspections since we kicked the program off in 2010. And we go back and look at the results. And we have found that mines that went through that impact inspection program have generally improved their compliance history and have improved their injury and accident rates at those mines. There's one I want to talk about, which was a Pennsylvania mine. I think it's Mercer Lime. Some folks here, probably in the audience today, that's involved in the history there. A couple of years ago, MSHA went in and conducted one of these impact inspections, and the results was not pretty in terms of the violations that were identified. There was an effort on the part of the steelworkers to work with us to convince the folks who was running that facility that they need to improve. After a lot of work and a lot of elbow grease, it's good to report that facility had a major turnaround, and they reduced substantially the violations and improved the injury rates. This was a case where, guess what one of the components was? The worker voice of the worker in the workplace to get us there. It was a use of our impact inspection program to identify a problem mine. Another one, I was in Alabama a few months ago with the Leeds cement facility. Anybody from Leeds here? It's the Steelworkers, Local 108. This was a facility that it's a 100-year-old cement plant, represented by the steelworkers that unfortunately got in bad shape. Had a lot of compliance problems, had a lot of injuries, and there was a decision made by those folks who worked at that plant to turn things around. They joined hands with MSHA, they restructured management a bit, and they brought the labor to the table, the steelworkers to the table. And when I arrived at that plant, it had successfully turned this 100-year-old plant that was on its last leg into one of the starships of the company. You know, those are success stories that we all know that can play out anywhere in this country if there's a decision to do that. So as we look forward to where we're going from here, I'm going to take just a step back for a second and talk about some of the initiatives and actions we have on the table. We have launched a number of aggressive enforcement programs, a pattern of violations program that targeted mines with chronic compliance histories, had a lot of violations. We did our first screening back in 2010. We identified about 53 mines that hit that list. They, for the most part, improved their performance after that happened. By 2012, after we went through about 3 years of that program using the same measuring stick, the number of mines that met that chronic criteria dropped to 20. And we saw a lot of improvement of some of the rougher mines that's operating in this country. So we know that program is successful as well as the impact inspection program. We've launched a number of strategic programs. One of them is the conveyor belt guarding program that we kicked off in 2010. Targeted the most common side of violations in the metal industry, went after it, created a PowerPoint, trained our inspectors, trained the mining industry to it, trained labor folks to it, And when we took a look back this summer from 2010, we had dropped violations over those standards by 40%. That was the most common standard cited under the Mine Act. Those are things that we've done working together. We're robbing my friend here from OSHA. We've had a couple initiatives where it's difficult to get a rule through in this country, and we try to figure out some strategic ways to get a better standard in place. One was on fall protection. We have a standard under our MSHA regulations that's a little bit difficult to understand. We took the OSHA standard on fall protection, used that to comply with our policy. This is a recommendation from both labor and industry, and we're seeing improvements as well as far as reduced violations across the country. And we're looking to do more of that. We just recently, I think 2 weeks ago, announced that we were using OSHA's new HASCOM standard to help us globalize our standards, so we had some commonality in how we apply hazard communication standards in this country. Those are things that we're looking at going forward. We have another one that we have some discussions that's been ongoing about, and that is this whole issue that Director or Assistant Secretary Michael spoke of earlier, and that's this issue of discrimination where minors are intimidated from reporting accidents and injuries. We've had some ongoing discussions. We're looking at the model they launched a little over a year ago, looking at our Mine Act, and I think you're going to be hearing more about that in the future. We're looking at our case law, and we are taking a serious look at how we're going to approach this issue of potential underreporting in the mining industry where miners may be intimidated from reporting accidents and injuries. We also spend a lot of time, like I say, on worker voice. I'm a firm believer that it's a key tool to improve mine safety in this country. And I think that anyone that goes to work has a right to see that that Mine Act is supposed to be there to protect them is. So today, we are launching for the first time to help miners, giving the representatives a little bit more of a tool, a new Miners Representative Handbook that is a Miners Rep's Guide under the Mine Act. This is the first one ever issued by MSHA, and this is the first copy actually off the press. I'm going to hand to Mike Wright. You got the first one, Mike. This is going to be published today, and it will be available on the website, I think about 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's going to go live, so it'll be a downloadable document with some guidance there, but being a miners representative, I can tell you that I think it's just critical. When I started, I was told I was a miners rep. I was 19 years old, go figure it out. We needed a better model than that. I think this is going to help miners reps across the country understand how the law works, how to use the law, and how to protect the workers that we're all responsible for. So we have a lot of projects on the deck. Enforcement, workers' voice. We're trying to tackle this huge backlog of cases we had. The day I walked in the door, I think there was about 80,000 citations and orders that had been contested by the mining industry, and we had no plan to fix it, quite frankly. Together with the Department of Labor and our friends at SOL and some funding from Congress, we was able to put a program together. This peaked out at about 89,000 cases. Imagine that. If an industry just contested every violation that OSHA wrote, MSHA wrote, you can imagine where we were at when that was actually happening at MSHA. We put a plan together, and collectively we've taken that 89,000 caseload down to the last count about 2 weeks ago to 36,000 cases. We're not where we want to be at yet, but we've got the problem, we believe, under control, and we're making headway to the extent that we're not going to let a fine that we issue undercut the value of the enforcement of the Mine Act. It's just that simple. If you look at the improvements that have been made over the past few years, I think it boils down to this. Miners' rights, where we at? We issued the most temporary reinstatements, putting miners back to work last year than any year in the history of the Mine Act. We issued more 105C whistleblower merit cases last year than any year in the history of the Mine Act. We're not even finished with 2013 yet. I think we've got about 3 months left. We've already issued more 105C whistleblower cases this year than we issued last year. That's a statement that there is a government that does have the miners back in this country, and we're very serious about it. When it comes to compliance, we've been working hard with the mining industry, and I have to give them credit. There's a lot of changes that's been made over the last 2 or 3 years that they've stepped up to the plate, and they've listened to what we've said, sometimes with our impact inspections and pattern violations, but there's a number of mine operators out there have plans in place to protect their miners. And we saw in 2 years an improvement in compliance with an 18% drop in a number of citations and orders that we have to issue at these mines. And I can tell you this, Don Foster, who's sitting here in the audience, and all my MSHA folks know, if it's there, we're citing it. If we cite it, there's going to be a penalty attached. And if it was one we should have wrote, we're going to defend the darn thing. That is the way that we approach mine safety, and I think there's a cultural change taking place. So we've had improvements in compliance. The big number that we all look at, and I look at this every day when I come to work, how many miners went home free of injury, free of illness, and alive? In 2011, we had the safest mining industry in this country in terms of injury rates, with the lowest injury rate ever recorded in history. Fatal numbers, we had the lowest fatal rates ever recorded in the history of mining in 2011, and was able to stabilize that to the point and even improve on it to 2012, then become the safest year in mining with the lowest fatal rates and lowest injury rates ever. I can tell you, it's taken every one of us to get the job done. And having been an old miner myself, starting out at 18 years of age, working with the mining industry, working with labor, representing workers for all those years, it does take us all to make this thing work. I believe in an operator responsibility. If you're going to put in a mine, you have an obligation to put a plan in place, make sure that plan's working every day, find and fix it. And by the way, those workers there need to have a voice in making sure everything's working out okay every day. We have a responsibility as an agency to audit that work to make sure that mines do have the Mine Act in place and to protect the nation's miners. So, in closing, I just want to thank you all for where we're at, because it took us all. Without your help and participation, we're not going to get there. And without your continued help and participation, we're not going to stay there, and we're not going to improve. So as we go forward, the only thing I have to say is all those numbers are behind us. You know, the future's ahead of us, and if we expect to do better tomorrow, we all got to look at how we can make improvements really apply that help the nation's miners go home safe and healthy every shift in this country. Thank you very much.